Hey guys, as always, thanks for stopping by. Well, the Supreme Court is hopping this week. Let's talk about that. Today's episode is brought to you by all of you patriots. Every thumbs up is a big thanks from me. Really do appreciate all of those. I don't know if I said that right. Every thumbs up is a big thanks. Well, I'm thankful. You guys are a big, big help. I get emails in literally every day, 2, 3, 4, 5 a day, where y'all say, hey Johnny, thanks for what you're doing. I always think and I say the same thing right back at you, patriots. You men and women are fantastic. 9 out of 10 of y'all ain't too bad at all. It really is a team effort, so every thumbs up, every like, every subscribe, it's all great. So thanks, I appreciate it. Before we head to the Supreme Court up in D.C., I told myself this morning, Johnny, you don't do this enough. Do it more. Tales from the comment section. I need to present to y'all some of the good emails and maybe the bad ones a little more often because it does create a discussion. So we're going to head there and then we're going up to D.C. Up first, Andy wrote in to say this. Hey, Johnny, would you support legislation that would allow truckers to legally carry firearms in their trucks? Well, Andy, I not only support legislation that allows truckers to carry firearms in their cabs, I also support legislation that would allow them to literally have bazookas, flamethrowers, and machine guns. Literally a turret out the top of their semi-rigs absolutely shall not be infringed. And if they can afford the cost and the maintenance and the fuel to literally have Apache helicopters circling their trucks, shall not be infringed. People ask sometimes about the red ring. Matt says this, you are supporting an anti-gun and an anti-Trump company by buying that groove ring, all caps, shame. Matt, number one, not made by Groove. Number two, why don't you check that privilege just a little bit? You're probably typing that on your phone, a phone made in a literal sweatshop in a literal communist country, and you're complaining to me about a piece of rubber, and you have to bring Trump into this? Where's the shame, pal? Oh, and if you're all about America and all about only supporting companies that just fall within the rules, the regulations, the dogma or the doctrine of what you believe in, go to your closet and throw out everything that was made in sweatshops. Every shoe, every piece of fabric will be out of your closet. You can't do this to people. Pick and choose your fights. Pick and choose your battles. This, not one. Next. Next. All right, Jeffrey says this. Before I read this, when I wrote this out a few minutes ago, and this is word for word verbatim from the comment section, y'all are going to think this is a joke. This is not a troll. I get 1 to 20 of these a week. These people are serious. This is from Jeffrey. He says this, I don't know who you think you're fooling. Your Gomer Pyle fake Southern accent. Your cop-style goatee. You are clearly a police shill pretending to be a Second Amendment advocate. Drama Llama, go!
Y'all gonna make me lose my mind. Up in here, up in here.
All right, here we go. Let's talk about the Supreme Court. I think the average gun guy, gun gal may not be aware that the Supreme Court, they don't hear every case that people knock on that door and ask them, hey, will y'all hear our case? They hear a very, very small sliver of cases. I mean, a huge group will be presented every calendar year to them, but they'll only hear so many cases. There's not enough time. It's a big country. There's a lot of legislation being pumped out about firearms, all of it's anti-gun, and people sue and people fight and people work their way up through the courts. This many will be asked, or the door in D.C. will be knocked on, but they'll just hear one little sliver. The Supreme Court has not heard and made a ruling on a case in literally 10 years. And so our fight is tough. But one good thing about the Supreme Court is historically they are super constitutionalists. They are pro-Constitution. Yes, I know there's some issues within the justices, but overall, I like when cases do go to the Supreme Court. We don't get enough. Now, there's a bunch going on right now. I'm going to burn right through these. I'll have links to everything that I can get linked in there, or you can do your Google work. It's all out there. All of this is public. Now, the Supreme Court just yesterday, they made a ruling. It wasn't a real ruling. It turned out to be moot. They made a non-ruling, or they basically said, hey, this case is over just yesterday. Now, In New York City, to be able to have a handgun, you got two options. You got the concealed carry permit. That ain't happening. Ain't nobody getting that one. And even if you do, there's so many rules attached to it, it's a mess. The second option is a premise permit, where it has to do with where you're at, what facilities you're in, maybe your home or maybe at a gun range. But they have an ordinance on the book that you're not allowed to carry that handgun outside the city. Now, New York City is one small area. Folks go in and out, and they have to jump over to one of the other areas or jump over to New Jersey. And the law is absolutely wrong. It's completely anti-gun. It made it to the Supreme Court. And right before they made the ruling, right before they started to hear the case, I think they did hear the case on this one. Don't hold me to that. But it was the first case in a decade. It was a 34-page non-ruling. Why? Well, New York knew they were going to get absolutely lambasted and waxed in the Supreme Court on this one, so they pulled back the regulation. And now they didn't make a ruling at all. The Supreme Court did not make a ruling. So it's a non-event, a non-starter, but the Supreme Court did hear it. That was really, really good. Kind of good news on one hand. They had agreed to hear the case. That was one of the sliver. Remember the sliver, just one of the few. They had agreed to hear their first case in a decade. New York, they balked and said, just kidding. Up next. Now, this happened 7 years ago. A lady named Lori Rodriguez, her husband was in a mental health situation, and in San Jose, California, the San Jose, I think it was the police department, they came in. Her firearms, Lori Rodriguez's firearms, were in a California-approved safe. Well, San Jose, the municipality, they confiscated those firearms 7 years ago without reason and, catch this, no warrant. Zero warrant, no reason, confiscated, refused to give her these firearms back. And it's been working its way up through the courts. This is a 7-year legal battle for this woman. Now, the Second Amendment Foundation is in the middle of it, and this is pretty cool. The Supreme Court, I don't know the actual verbiage on this, but pretty much the gist of it is the Supreme Court said, hey, San Jose, why? Give us your reason why you won't give these firearms back to this lady, and we want the answer by May 20th. No warrant. They took the lady's gun. 7 years later, she's still in a big battle. So the Supreme Court is there. They want some answers from San Jose, California. Watching this one, that one's pretty cool. Terrible for the lady, but big shout out to the Second Amendment Foundation. Hope this lady gets her guns back. And more importantly, well, that is important, but maybe with bigger implications, broader implications, man, I hope San Jose gets the smackdown atomic elbow by the Supreme Court. Up next, now, this gets a little bit ins and outs, and we get into legalese verbiage. When they decide, they being the Supreme Court, they decide which cases to hear, they sit down and they discuss it. This Friday, this coming Friday, this is good news, they're going to be discussing 10, it was actually maybe more than 10, we know for sure 10 Second Amendment cases are going to be discussed this week. And that's a big, big deal. They're going to talk about them and decide if they're going to be hearing them or not. Now, it is sweeping. It is a ton of stuff. The one that's in the news is the assault weapons ban. There's a chance that the Supreme Court's going to be, once and for all, doing a ruling, hearing it and making a ruling on the assault weapons bans all over the place. The big case is Worman versus the state of Massachusetts. I'll put that down below as well. But they're also going to be talking about hearing 10 cases. This is a big deal. Assault weapons ban is the big one. They're also going to be dealing with magazine stuff. The California microstamp ban, basically no new firearms or new handguns can be sold in the state of California. Why? Because of that dumpster fire, Kamala Harris. After you fire it and the shell is ejected, that shell has to have multiple original and unique markings on it. It's nonsense. The technology isn't even there. Basically, no new handguns in. It's backdoor gun control, so that might be headed to the Supreme Court. Interstate handgun purchases, you know how you can't go to another state and purchase a handgun. That ban might be listened to. And then also in Illinois, folks that are out of state but they're residents of Illinois, they all get denied their rights to concealed carry a firearm. So that one also may get listened to. So a lot going on right now. Again, we don't, like sometimes you guys will ask, hey, what about the actual verbiage? Well, we don't know because this is all being talked about right now. Again, I'm going to put as much down there as I can. It's an absolute mess. but I'm watching it, especially this one coming up on May 20th. That one's pretty exciting. As always, I appreciate y'all stopping by, and to Kamala Harris and those nitwits out in California, from my cold, dead hands. Bye.